Do you think he killed himself?
No, absolutely not.
You,
No
you
question.
don't?
I don't have I don't have a question in my mind that he.
Really?
So same thing. Let's keep ourselves outside of the world of speculation. Let's look at the evidence. Michael Baden, the most famous forensic pathologist in the world, said that he analyzed the autopsy based upon the records provided to him by his brother, Mark Epstein, Jeffrey Epstein's brother, Mark Epstein. Michael Baden concluded that, it's not consistent with a hanging. The explanation from the Department of Justice just makes absolutely no sense. Bryan, there's 3 minutes of missing footage from the cameras. None of the other inmates have ever been revealed. The DOJ and the BOP refuses to release the names of the inmates who were housed in the SHU around the same time. The government's explanation doesn't make any damn sense. That's all I know.
And could be considered off-limits.
Guys, I'm about to talk to Saagar Enjeti, or Saagar Enjeti. We had a great conversation, and for those of you who like stand-up, I'll be at the Mic Drop Comedy Club in San Diego. Come see me August 25 and 26. And then I'll be in Charlotte. Let's see where I'm going to be. I'll be in Charlotte, North Carolina at the Comedy Zone. That'll be September 19th and 20th. I'll be at the Covina Laugh Factory, I think the weekend before that. Then I'm in Albuquerque, New Mexico, October 3rd and 4th. So come get some. I'm excited. I'll see you then. In the meantime, enjoy this conversation with Saagar Enjeti. Saagar, welcome to the mother and father of all podcasts, Off Limits, because what we talk about is off limits. I've never been good at coming up with good names for podcasts, but this is the one, dude. And I know you've been very excited.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, man, I've been a fan long time, and I think we probably align politically, and I don't think I think what I try to do is stay away from my echo chamber. But I do appreciate that you, first of all, you're with Crystal and you tend to put yourself in the mix. And I think that's so important. It's so important. And I guess, I know you've talked about Epstein to death. I'd love to touch on whatever you want to touch on, but I'd love to get some perspective. I want to give you my assessment of Epstein, and then I want you to tell me what you think of it.
Tell me.
And then I want to jump over to that conflict that seems to be going well. The Gaza, Israel conflict. I lived in the Middle East for 8 years of my life. I've been to Israel, blah blah blah. But so part of this is we'll get to that in a second. But let's just and by the way, I want to get to whatever's on your mind too, and what you worry about and what you think about, because sometimes I think we spend a whole lot of time looking over here when we should be looking at, I don't know, a $37 trillion debt that's going to affect all of us. I mean, there are certain head fakes here, and there's a lot of noise in one direction, but the signal might very well be on the other side over here. So, but let me give you a very quick synopsis of what I think the whole Epstein thing is about. And I know you've gone down this rabbit hole, and let's see what you think. My guess is, based on the fact that he had his money in Israel, that he was close to Ehud Barak, that Les Wexler was a huge patron of Israel and a supporter of Israel. My guess is that in one way or another, he was connected to Mossad. He was connected to the Israeli government. That the idea behind Epstein Island was get powerful people, including ex-presidents of the United States, to this island in a compromising position so that we have some kind of leverage. It does seem he had something over Wexler. How you give somebody full access, essentially, to your $4 billion fortune after knowing them for 2 years makes zero sense unless you got video of them with like somebody underage or something crazy. And so it does seem like this was a honeypot. This was some kind of an operation that Mossad was running. And the problem with making that public is, and even finding a paper trail or a digital trail, is that it would then show that the Israeli government not only has influence over our government, but also was putting ex-presidents and leaders of industry in compromising positions, leaders of industry specifically from the United States, like Bill Gates. And that would be a disaster for them from a public relations standpoint. So that's my assessment, and that's where it stands. Go. Thought.
Very plausible, Brian. Very plausible. I will just say I'm not yet ready to go there. I actually still believe, and by the way, I'm not ruling any of that out. I'm just trying to go where the evidence takes me. In the Wexner case, I cannot help but agree with you. I mean, I just think that the circumstances of giving full power of attorney over to somebody who you only started investing your money with some 3-4 years prior, and eventually transferring vast assets, putting this person in charge of your foundation through which they disperse millions of dollars, including to the former Israeli prime minister, is incredibly suspect as hell. But I mean, one of the things that I've really tried in the Tucker Carlson and Andrew Schultz appearance is to focus in on what we do know. And what we do know is that the source of Jeffrey Epstein's wealth remains a mystery to this day. Literally, while you and I are speaking, there are files inside of the United States government right now for suspicious activities reports filed by the large banks. Senator Ron Wyden, he is a Democrat, but whatever, don't care about that. Senator Ron Wyden is the chairman of the Financial Services Committee, has actually had him and Republican staff. By the way, if you're listening, I've been trying to get into contact with you. Please hit me up because I want to know what's in those. They were allowed to view those and to take handwritten notes. All of this still remains classified, showing some $1.5 billion in transactions that were coming in and out of the Epstein accounts. I believe that the money is the most important part of this story. I'm not yet sure if the honeypot actually was an intelligence operation, but I know almost for certain that the money itself was deeply intertwined with Israeli, with U.S., and with Saudi, and perhaps Russia, Chinese, other interests. I would take that to the bank. And the reason why is that the source of the wealth is both so not only mysterious but unexplainable. You also have all of these multiple verified connections. And if you'll allow me just to go back like a little bit. So Jeffrey Epstein's first mentor in money laundering was a guy named Douglas Leese. Douglas Leese is a verified arms trafficker who was named in UK Parliament documents, so we know that he was specifically involved in these types of transactions. But more importantly, from that perspective, is that Douglas Leese introduced Jeffrey Epstein to people like Robert Maxwell, the father of Ghislaine Maxwell. I'll remind people, Robert Maxwell's Mossad code name was Mega. He received a state funeral in Israel. Okay, so are we all understanding this? Robert Maxwell himself was a very strange character. He changed his name many different times.
So did Lease, I think. So did Lease, I believe.
Oh yeah, I mean all of these guys are they're textbook intelligence operatives. And let's be clear here, they don't work for CIA. This is another big misconception, and also where the word games all come into play. Everyone says, "Oh, he worked for it." And he's former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett. Epstein never worked for Mossad. Well, what about worked with Mossad? That's actually a big question mark, right? And it's not Mossad, CIA. We know back in the 1980s when Epstein was just in his 20s, he was on a private plane with Douglas Leese actually to the Pentagon and was working on basically in the background with all of these various sketchy financial transactions, which are the beating heart of the American secret empire. And what I mean by that is you're probably old enough, Ryan, to remember Iran-Contra. A lot of people who are my age and others, I'm literally just going off of the reading, but that was, in retrospect, that kind of was the gateway to this entire shadowy financial system where the CIA and the U.S. intelligence community circumvents U.S. law by specifically financing different arms transactions and others, including running drugs, letting people get away with all kinds of crimes, all to fulfill something which was explicitly barred by U.S. law and eventually comes out effectively at the direction of the White House of the United States. So that shows you how this can all be done. And it's through black money. Now, something I've tried to explain as well is that guys like Epstein, Douglas Leese, Robert Maxwell, Adnan Khashoggi, they're very important to the system. CIA does not open up a bank, at JP Morgan Chase that says CIA on it, right? That's not how this all works. Right. The analogy I use is, everybody's probably seen the movie Argo. It's a decent movie. But one of the plot lines in Argo is what? Is that they go to LA and they set up a front company. In one case, the guy actually puts up his own money and he gets recompensated on the back end, right? But so everything looks legit in terms of the paper trail. There have been multiple instances of this, if we look at other secret CIA operations, where people who are frontmen and who are able to front cash or help move cash or set up legitimate financial transactions and move things through the global financial system, they are integral to the intelligence operation. This is basically something I'm willing to go to the mat for that Epstein was involved in all the way from the 1980s, at the very least up until the mid 2000s.
So, guys, today's sponsor is Aura, and I'm going to do something with Kevin here, my producer, and I'm going to have you Google my name and let's see what comes up. Because what you guys don't realize is that there are data brokers out there that literally sell your information. It's on the dark web. It's anywhere. They sell it without your consent. And basically, they can find anything they want to about you if you don't have a company like Aura. Google it right now. Let me see. Just Google my name. Let's see what comes up. This is what's kind of crazy about Aura, is that they will monitor the web for you. When somebody is trying to steal your identity, when somebody's using your data for something, they will go to those sites and scrub your name from those sites. And I'm going to give you an example. This is all written down. You'll get alerts if your personal info is found on the dark web, okay? Real-time fraud alerts for credit and banking, 24/7 monitoring to help you keep your identity secure, a secure VPN, antivirus password manager, and more. And how about this? US-based support available around the clock if something goes wrong, okay? That's what you get when it comes to Aura. Essentially, you know that your identity, that your data is yours. It's not being brokered. It's not being sold to third parties. And that is what's happening to all of us. Data is big business. So at the end of the day, I don't know about you, but I don't like the idea that all my information is that easily accessible. Because I happen to know people who've had their lives ruined because people got a hold of their data and basically did what they wanted. And they did a whole bunch of stuff, and people could do a lot with it. Not to mention make money on it. So we just Googled my name, and all my information, all my personal information is on the web with a simple Google search. So I'm doing this Aura thing right now. I am signing up for Aura right now. I don't know about you, but I am doing that, and they're my sponsor. Go to aura.com/Callen. Try it for 2 weeks. In that process, they will do a whole audit for you. They will tell you where your name is, where your name isn't, and they will scrub those sites. In today's world, privacy is dead. You want to take a step toward privacy? Aura has got you. Aura.com. Give it a shot. I know I'm 100% sold. After seeing that, that's nuts. That's actually crazy.
That's wild.
I actually didn't know that.
Yeah.
Until this whole read. That's outrageous. And I'm a little unnerved right now. Aura.com/Callen. Try it for 2 weeks. You will not be sorry. I know I'm going to.
Now, the reason why I think there perhaps could be something to what you're saying, but at the very least I know what I'm saying has some influence, is because of the non-prosecution agreement of 2007. 2007 is just a breakage point, which has no earthly explanation other.
You're talking about when he was arrested, and there were 40 witnesses, many
That's
underage, right, who said this guy has been essentially having sex and while raping. Because it is even if it's consensual, if the girl's 14, 15, we call that rape. You can call it statutory rape, but whatever. When you're locked up in a freaking huge mansion, give me a break. So yes. Go on.
It's disgusting.
An open and shut case. Yeah.
It was open and shut case, right? So Palm Beach is 2005. A father comes forward. My 14-year-old daughter was approached by Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein. Palm Beach County PD starts the investigation. Here's the thing. Palm Beach County PD basically realizes, they're like, oh my God, we're up against Goliath here, right? Like we can't deal with this because they've got him on an ironclad prostitution charge. But with all the lawyers and the money, they're realizing what they're up against. And so they do the responsible thing. They're like, well, we see some evidence of sex trafficking and crossing the state lines. Obviously, all this money, let's take it to the feds. The feds pick up the case sometime around 2005, 2006. Now, 2005, 2006, this guy, Alex Acosta, who eventually becomes the labor secretary under Donald Trump, is the person who becomes in charge of the case. Acosta supervises...
Was he the attorney general?
He was not the attorney general. He was like the U.S. attorney for the Southern District of Florida. Okay. Not Southern Florida, I think is what it was. Southern Florida. Right, so he is in charge, greenlights this FBI investigation. By the way, a lot of the FBI agents on the case have spoken out about this. So everything I'm saying is public record. You can go and look at the interviews with them. They, as you said, they believe they had an open and shut case 40 different victims, crossing state lines. This is enough to put anybody away forever. They create an indictment, and Epstein is secretly indicted sometime 2006, 2007. By the way, that indictment has never yet seen the light of day. Now, then Jeffrey Epstein, what does he do? He hires Kenneth Starr, Alan Dershowitz, Starr legal team. Now, let me also contextualize again, because I'm realizing, I'm starting to get old. People may not know who Kenneth Starr was. Kenneth Starr was one of the household name in American politics. He was in charge of the Lewinsky scandal as the investigator for House Republicans. He was a huge deal. It's almost difficult to contextualize it for people who kind of weren't around in the 1990s. But this was a person with a lot of cachet in Republican politics. Starr is working for him. He hires this crack legal team. They fly down to Florida to negotiate with Alex Acosta. What they come out with is an extraordinary result where Jeffrey Epstein only has to plead guilty to a prostitution charge, including a solicitation of a minor, registering as a sex offender, 15 months in the Palm Beach County Jail, 6 days a week, released 12 hours a day.
Gets his own wing. Gets his own wing.
He's getting picked up in a server. And here's the thing. That type of deal, everyone says, oh, he's rich, all this. I just don't buy it. It's not about money. It's the fact that they had the secret indictment, and you can't just move from indictment to the non-prosecution agreement that they eventually come to. Because that agreement not only gives him these sweetheart conditions, he signs a deal with the federal government. I'll return to this because this deal is important to the Ghislaine Maxwell case. Well, this deal grants him immunity from all further prosecution under these charges and all unindicted co-conspirators, including a woman named Ghislaine Maxwell. Ghislaine Maxwell, today you and I are speaking, she is arguing before the United States Supreme Court that the government should never have been allowed to prosecute her because they granted her immunity in 2007. Now, the only reason that all of this has come to light is because the government did something else extraordinary beyond the circumstances of that deal. They violated the federal rights of the victims of Jeffrey Epstein.
Right, because when you do a plea deal, you have to go to their lawyers and the victims and say, here's why we're going to let him.
And let's explain that, Brian. Here's the thing, man. They don't even have to say, do you approve of this? All they have to do is notify you. That's it. All they have to do is notify. They never did. All right? So that is the question of why.
I bet you they did that because some of them probably knew this would bite them in the ass later. I wouldn't be surprised if they kind of went, oops, accidentally on purpose. That's what I like to believe.
You may be right, Brian. I mean, this is, look, again, let's just purely live in the realm of fact, because everyone talks, conspiracy, blah, blah, blah. It's all nonsense. Like, look at the facts. People don't get away with those types of things. Then it becomes an open question about why and how did this all happen. And there's an unattributed quote to Alex Acosta, quote, I was told he belonged to intelligence. That quote is in dispute. He has denied it previously when he was asked by the Department of Justice. By the way, I would like for the Department of Justice to release the transcript of the interview. The exact circumstance in which they asked him that question is very important. By the way, Alex Acosta today remains silent. Nobody hasn't given an interview on the subject. He is actually on the board of Newsmax, which is a conservative channel. And I'm not sure if you saw this, Brian, just yesterday, Newsmax had a segment where they said maybe Ghislaine Maxwell is a victim. I'm just saying.
Wow.
Okay, these are facts.
Wow.
All right. Yeah. So
wow. I did not see that. Wow.
Yeah. It just happened yesterday.
I mean, okay. That it's so interesting to me. It gets, the plot seems to thicken. Man. I mean, because what do you think? Why in the world do you think people are being quiet about this? Are they hearing? The only thing I can think is, are they being told behind the scenes that this is a national security issue? That he was doing things for our government, maybe our allies like Israel, that were bigger than all of this? Is this what we're talking about? I don't buy that Trump was on the list and he has the power to shut everybody up. I know he's got loyalists, but it just seems far-fetched that he'd be able to do that. But I don't know. I don't even know if he would be legally able to keep them quiet.
Look, it's one of those things where the number of people who actually know about this is probably quite small, and there are enforcement mechanisms. Everyone always says, how could you keep it a secret? I'm sure, I hope you've read the book Chaos by Tom O'Neill about
I've
Charlie
not
Manson?
read the book Chaos,
Okay.
although all my friends are
It's
always
incredible.
telling me I have to read this book.
Here's the reason why it's an important book. O'Neill spends 20 years on the story and basically gets to the point, which is assembling a circumstantial case that Manson was a CIA asset, basically a result of something horribly gone wrong and run by the government. But the fascinating part of the book is that even with 20 years of experience, and when Manson and everybody else involved in the case, nobody even particularly would care anymore if it did come out, is that all of the people who are complicit, from the police officers to the administrators to others on down, they still keep their mouths shut up until their dying day. Why? Right? It was 1960.
Yeah,
Like, why? And my point, though, is that's evidence of how even decades later, they still are afraid of some part of the system. JFK is another, obviously, classic example.
Well, they might be afraid of prosecution. I mean, there are
It
certain
could be.
things.
Yeah.
So, for example, in the Epstein case, you have to take into account, people are like, well, release these files. Well, the problem with the files is you've got victims who want to remain anonymous. You cannot legally, legally just release a bunch of information, especially when it comes to a plea deal. That plea deal, by the way, when he got that plea deal, the evidence was not gathered. There was no evidence. So there's also a lot of that, right? And I don't mean to beat up on Israel or any of that. There's been enough of that. I'm not doing that. I'm all I'm saying is that it does seem like that he had some kind of sponsorship or was doing something and had protection. There's no doubt. There's no doubt that someone was protecting this guy.
That's right.
And there's no doubt that whoever was protecting this guy was able to get into the ear of the Justice Department at the highest levels. And how do you do that? You go, look, I know this guy might be a total scumbag, but this is a matter of national security. Now, the larger question becomes, and that's what's been flirted around, is there another government like Israel that has that kind of influence over our government? This is where we get, into this whole situation, which I understand why people are hesitant to talk about that, because it starts to get into this whole anti-Semitic world that we're already in. I get it, but something was going on with powerful people, and or guess what? And I would say to you, well, maybe the guy just figured out a way to blackmail really rich people for his own gain, maybe. But then you'd have to explain why he was able to essentially intimidate the hell out of Condé Nast and Vanity Fair, and more importantly, get that plea deal, which made absolutely zero sense. There's no way you could do that without having connections to the most powerful people in our government.
Yeah, allow me to expand on that, because the Condé Nast thing shows the height of his power. I mean, again, it's very hard to contextualize for people how powerful Condé Nast was in the year 2003 when the Jeffrey Epstein story comes out. We're talking about Vogue, like we're talking about Vanity Fair, in a time when that never mattered ever more in American culture. I mean, Brian, you've been in Hollywood for a long time. Like that, it's like Variety or something like that, right? Yeah. Like these are the beating heart of the system of American culture.
Yeah, I mean, I can also tell you, if Vanity Fair was going to write an article about you, I can tell you, no matter how powerful you weren't doing anything about it. They were going to assassinate you the way they saw fit, and there was nothing you were going to be able to do about it. That's why Vanity Fair could move the needle.
Exactly, and so he's powerful enough at this time to quash sexual assault allegations against him in the story and intelligence connections against him in the story. The editor-in-chief of Vanity Fair, Graydon Carter, told colleagues that somebody left a bullet, near his home and a dead cat. I mean, this is mafia-level stuff. He's come out since and denied it, but at the time, he literally told people inside of the Vanity Fair.
He's denied it.
He said that he thought it was Bush-related bullshit, okay? But my point is, listen, Vicky Ward, the journalist in charge, she said, I tried to put it in, and they took it out. All right? I mean, I believe her above everybody else. She's also talked about how she was pregnant at the time that she was reporting, and she was scared for her life in a lot of these cases, and that's part of the reason why.
Doesn't it make sense that an intelligence apparatus, it makes sense if I'm any country and I have the ability to get some dirt over very powerful people, I'm doing it.
Of course.
I'm not surprised that an intelligence apparatus like Mossad or the CIA or whatever. I'm sure they do that all the time. They've always done that stuff.
And that's the thing too. I mean, this honeypot thing, nobody quite knows. Again, I'm not yet ready to go there, but it wouldn't surprise me. I think it was the money. Maybe the honeypot stuff, it was secondary. Maybe they're like, oh yeah, it's also, did he ever turn it up? I have no idea. Again, I'm just sticking to the money. The money almost tells me everything I need to know because the money is how you get away with the prosecution.
But again, we still don't know why. Wexler's still alive, I think, isn't he?
Yeah, he is alive. He's like 90 something.
And that's a savvy dude because he said nothing about this. Dude, he had, you gave him power of attorney over he was one of the richest men in the world. Mm-hmm. It's insane. Yes. So he had some dirt on that guy. There's no other explanation. Billionaires do not behave that way. Sorry. There's no way. So it wasn't just Epstein. It was probably, I don't know, but come on.
Well, it's not just Wexner. There are all kinds of mystifying financial transactions. Leon Black, one of the most powerful men in New York, worth $9 billion, Apollo Group. Again, I mean, for people who are just listening, it's hard for me to put into words. Apollo Group was like the PE equity giant. They were the guys, the buy bust. We come in ruthless. Some of the biggest raiders, most powerful men on Wall Street. And he literally paid Epstein between $150 and $170 million through various different LLC cutouts. And by the way, this is after Epstein is a convicted sex offender.
But he's also, by the way, and he's also in his 20s when he gets in with these people. Like, explain to me how a 20-something college dropout from Cooper Union, please explain to me how you end up on private jets with the people that run the entire world. Yes, I'm sorry. Right. I know those kind of guys are not hanging out with unless Douglas Lease, who clearly had connections to all kinds of nefarious or at least national security apparatuses from different countries. And he said, hey, this kid is going to be our plant.
It doesn't make sense any other way. The official narrative, to believe this, I mean, I have seen the counter case more recently. A lot of Israeli defenders, Mossad defenders have been like, what you're discounting is, a charismatic, high IQ individual. But like, that just doesn't get you, to the Dalton School, to Bear Stearns, to private jets with Douglas Lease, on its face, the company that he sets up, the J. Epstein Company, which accepts only clients of $1 billion in a year where there are only 140 billionaires on the planet, does literally not make sense. It doesn't make sense. He's not a certified financial transactor. He has never engaged. Of it. Right. So, the reason why I could tell you that Apollo Group, when I was like, oh, guys, this is Apollo Group, is because there are records of Apollo Group's financial success. There are a lot of rich people who invest in Apollo who go out and deploy their money to buy different companies, take them private, do mergers, acquisitions, etc. This is a classic story of private equity, right? This is why the entire industry exists. There is not one record of Epstein ever doing any of that, yet having supposedly billions of dollars under his management. And I shouldn't say supposedly. We know $1.5 billion moving in and out of his accounts. $1.5 billion. Cash money. That is an entity, that sovereign entity in and of itself that moves on Wall Street.
All right, take me to Ghislaine Maxwell. Take me there. Yeah. I didn't know. I don't know anything about why she was convicted. She was convicted of sex trafficking underage girls to Jeffrey Epstein, who's dead now. So we've got probably a bunch of witnesses that said she did this, that, and the other thing. So she's put away for 20 years. Why she didn't run away, why she didn't go to France is also a mystery. She was up in New Hampshire. That's another thing. Maybe she thought she could beat this. Maybe she thought she could plea her way out of this. Maybe she thought she had information that the government wanted. And why the government didn't make a deal with her to get some of the bigger fish, please explain. And now they're interviewing her. Please, have you gone down this rabbit hole? Because I don't know nothing, man.
Yeah,
I don't know nothing. I want the truth.
All right, so how did they meet? How did Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein
through Robert Maxwell.
through Robert Maxwell, the father of Ghislaine Maxwell. Robert Maxwell, Mossad asset, UK national, tabloid king in the UK. Jeffrey Epstein met Robert Maxwell through who? Douglas Leese, the arms trafficker. Robert Maxwell has been involved in what? Iran-Contra, many other different arms deals between Israel and Iran and all of these other crazy things that were happening there at the time. He's the exact type of money man that Jeffrey Epstein eventually becomes. They meet under these circumstances around the intelligence apparatus, what I believe he was involved in, an intelligence apparatus. And they meet somewhere around the 1980s, and they obviously link up somewhere around the 1990s, where sometime she joins Epstein here. We know from her trial that by the early 90s, 93 to 95 to 98, she's already engaged in the pyramid operation, in the farming of like meeting young girls, enticing them, bringing them to different properties. By the way, some of the properties were from who? Leslie Wexner, who we mentioned earlier, the billionaire, right? Who is the richest man in Ohio. Many of the Maxwell trial actually took place in Ohio. The important thing to here understand from the Maxwell case is that in 2019, again, this is after, 2020, after Epstein dies and she is eventually arrested at this weird compound in New Hampshire, to what end, why, what circumstances that, didn't lead her to flee to. The entire thing is insane. Well, when she is apprehended, she's prosecuted by Maureen Comey, who is the daughter of James Comey. And in that prosecution,
I didn't know that.
A lot of people didn't know that.
Okay.
She also, by the way, Maureen Comey was just fired. She boxed the Diddy case. I don't know if you saw that either. That was her as well.
Yeah.
So she's the person who, she screwed up. But anyway, with the Ghislaine Maxwell case, what happens is it's a narrowly tailored indictment. It focuses in on these early 1990s crimes, long before Epstein is involved or seen with the most powerful people in the world and all this other stuff.
I have a question before you
go
go on.
ahead. Yeah.
What about the statute of limitations?
I was looking into that. I'm not exactly sure at the trial. I'm not. I have to go and to see if it circumscribes whether that non-prosecution agreement was the year of the statute of limitations that allows them to limit back or not. I have not actually gotten a clear answer as to how they got around that. But yeah, anyway, again, caveat, I'm not a lawyer. Okay, let's also put that out there as well. This is all really based on my own reading. But the way that the case in the U.S. government prosecutes its case against Maxwell is a very narrowly tailored kind of limited hangout. This is the Watergate term that was used by Haldeman and by Nixon. The idea of a limited hangout is that it's on the Watergate tapes, is that you admit some wrongdoing to not admit all wrongdoing to make sure that you have it. So the case was prosecuted in such a way that it only implicated Maxwell and Epstein. It was narrowly tailored to a couple of victims. Basically had her dead to rights, so that way she can go away for 20 years, she could shut up, and she can fuck off forever, right? The problem with this entire thing is that what's now being revealed today is that we see from the Deputy Attorney General, our current Deputy Attorney General, Todd Blanche has now had several hours of discussions with Ghislaine Maxwell about third-party individuals. This is what you and I are interested in. Now, according to our government, our Department of Justice, Ghislaine has never been asked by the Department of Justice about third-party individuals. That's crazy. Okay? That's crazy. Because I have read a lot about the federal system. I've talked to people who've been prosecuted by the feds. The number one question is, what do you got? You got anything on anybody? What can you offer? What are we doing here?
Right.
Instead, they took it to trial on this case of the narrowly tailored stuff that stems back to the 90s, and they never even said, what do you have on anybody else? Now, according to the government today, they're saying she gave them information on more than 100 individuals. Now, to what end? What does that mean? Is it about sex trafficking? We have no idea. By the way, release the tapes. I would love that. But the point is that the government says in 2020, whenever they arrested her and prosecuted her, they never even asked, do you have any information on others? That's sketchy. See what I'm saying? I continue to point out these things. People do not go through the federal system who have information on others and are connected to a vast conspiracy. Now, okay.
By the way, here's why it's really sketchy. You and I have children. If I thought that the person in front of me had dirt on powerful people that were with underage girls or maybe boys as well, I want to know. How about that?
Yes.
That's more important than putting Ghislaine Maxwell in jail. That's more important. if there was indeed that, if you got a bunch of really rich dudes and they're with a bunch of like hookers in their 20s and 30s, I don't really care, to be honest with you. But if you've got these 14, 15, 16-year-old girls, 17-year-old underage girls there, and you got all these guys, I want to know what's going on. I want to know, and I think anybody else would too who has any decency.
Yeah, I just the whole thing doesn't make any sense. And the more I've learned about the case, the more it's kind of like Kennedy. I don't know exactly what happened. I definitely know it's not the Warren Commission. I know that for sure, right? And we can go down many different rabbit holes. It's just like Charlie Manson. I can't say
but that's
for
more
sure.
easy. That's easier for me to believe. Saagar, if you said to me, it turns out a lone communist, that's what his wife said, a lone communist just got lucky and took a shot. I can believe that. I can believe that one person might have pulled something that I went up there, I saw the shot. It's not that hard a shot, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, but what about the magic bullet? See, with the magic, it all falls apart on the magic bullet. That's my point.
I heard that the magic bullet was actually never even existed. I heard there was no magic bullet. It wasn't on the gurney. So a lot of this stuff, again, for me, you tell me a lone communist pulled it off, I go, yeah, that's happened. There are loners who end up pulling off crazy things. No problem. This is way more. I mean, this is impossible. You're not connecting any dots. All of us go, I'm sorry. We know he got this crazy plea deal. We don't know who gave it to him. We know that Acosta probably said X, Y, and Z. Now he's saying he didn't. Come on, man. And I love how they're like, we're going to release the Epstein files. When? How is this? How long is this taking? Are you waiting for your computers to boot up? Like, so wait. So Ghislaine right now is speaking to. Ghislaine is speaking to the prosecutors.
The Department of Justice, the main justice. So that's the other thing. This is an extraordinary case. The number 2 individual of the Department of Justice is personally sitting down with Ghislaine Maxwell. That shit doesn't happen, period. In fact, the Deputy Attorney General at the time, this is the theory, is the person who made the call to Acosta and said, yeah, this is what we're doing with Epstein. By the way, that's more evidence that Acosta, there's no way he could have signed that deal with Epstein without sign off from Washington. It doesn't happen. Like all the way at the top levels of the Department of Justice. In this similar case, the Attorney General Pam Bondi and Trump have basically put the Deputy AG in charge of these direct negotiations or whatever is going on with Maxwell. But here's where I'm very worried, Brian. The president himself is acting strange. Can we just all admit that? I mean, I'm going to release the files. I'm not today. Yes, actually, literally yesterday, he said, I never had the privilege of going to Epstein's Island. In terms of Maxwell, he said, quote, I wish her well, even though, she knows that she's a convicted sex offender. I mean, I could go on forever. Like, he's acting weird. Now, I actually don't know why. And to be clear, just so people understand, I don't fully buy the current lib theory that he is compromised or whatever by Epstein. I think he's probably embarrassed. I personally think he's just embarrassed over his decades-long friendship with Epstein, which is embarrassing. It's embarrassing. Okay, it just is. All right. These guys they have more pictures together than I do with my own childhood best friend. And they were in the 80s.
And by the way,
it's weird.
He was connected to the Victoria's Secret models.
Right.
So if you guys just go to the Victoria's Secret catalog from the 90s and you'll be like, oh, okay, well, you're a billionaire in New York. That makes a lot of sense. I lived in New York back then. I saw that whole world. I mean, it was, yeah. So it's not surprising that if a dude like Epstein had connections to the Victoria's Secret models, you're going to be friends with him. That's something we're leaving out. Sorry.
Right. Look, is it not believable that Donald Trump, the tabloid king who bragged about his dick sizes and affairs, was hanging out with a guy who also hung out with models? And in 2002, Trump goes on the record and says, Jeffrey, he has a great social life. He likes him young. This is all public record. Okay. Listen, again, I don't buy the whole, he was involved with young girls and all that stuff, because I do actually think that probably would have come out if that was verified or something. But he's acting weird. He's acting weird. And by acting weird, what I worry about, and this is why I think this is all being mishandled, is not only, number one, release all the Epstein files, release, number two, all of the Treasury documents, which I wasn't even aware of.
What are the Treasury documents? That's the money trail?
I referenced that earlier, the $1.5 billion in suspicious activity reports that were filed by the big banks after Epstein's death in 2019.
Wow.
The money trail is everything. And we only get little bits of knowledge. So the New York Financial Services Department fined Deutsche Bank some in 2020. I read the entire report. I highly recommend everybody. It's all public record. You can go and read it. The emails in this bank are insane. In 2015 or whatever, they're like, yeah, guys, I mean, we're violating all these bank policies. He's a convicted sex offender. And they're like, yeah, it's good for business, you know? And they're like, yeah, guys, he is withdrawing, $9,900 in cash. And he's sending all these sketchy wire transfers to Russia for all these Eastern European women. And they're like, yeah, it's okay. And it goes all the way up to the highest level of the bank where they have like minutes from a board meeting. I mean, and Brian, imagine, man, just 2 weeks, you and I go to our banks and we just withdraw $9,900 in cash. FBI is getting called, okay? It's happening. This is going on for years. And he's like, oh, it's for tips. I mean, do you know how hard it is to send a wire? Like if I have to like pay, it's not simple. Like they call you. They're like, hey, what's the purpose? This guy's wiring millions, billions of dollars, like all over the world. It's crazy. And the fine reveals the purposes inside the bank, where the bank basically violates all of its own policies on KYC, called Know Your Customer laws, and they end up having to pay a huge fine to New York State. Also, the CEO of Barclays Bank, who Jess Staley, he just resigned in the last year or so over his connections with Epstein. This brings us back to Israel, by the way. In 2011, when he's working at JP Morgan, he's a senior director there. He sends an email to Epstein, something along the lines of, against all odds, we have secured a meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu. He forwards it to Epstein. Epstein replies, surprise, surprise, basically indicating that I brokered this meeting, right? So Epstein is linked to 4 separate Israeli prime ministers through our documents.
Nothing to see here. Nothing to see here.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, look, I just can't drop the money trail, the paper trail. I mean, sketchy doesn't even really it's not the right word. Like it's as smoke as it gets, in terms of investigating fire.
Do you think, what do you think comes out of the Ghislaine Maxwell meetings?
I don't know. My greatest fear is that Trump pardons her. I think Trump is running afraid. I think that he is, and by what I mean by that is that,
think he'll pardon her?
It's possible. Yeah. I mean,
based on what? That she was framed, that she didn't do anything?
Well, if she comes forward and she implicates a bunch of people who are not Donald Trump, or maybe she says like, I'm not going to name Donald Trump. It's like, there's literally only one person in the world who could offer her a pardon. His name is Trump. And so you could see, this is why the case is not being handled well. And these accusations, the Justice Department is not yet supposed to run on the whims of a single individual, no matter what. This is why I think they should appoint a special prosecutor, and all dealings with Ghislaine Maxwell should be completely independent of the political system. So that
you believe she's guilty of sin, or is she being railroaded?
Well, a jury of her peers found her guilty of sin, so it's not just what I believe. Okay, so a jury of her peers,
after looking at all the evidence and everything else,
look, as you said,
she was getting young girls, underage girls, for Jeffrey Epstein, and
she's sick.
That has been proven in court of law.
Brian, I think one important thing to note is a lot of people gloss over the fact that she also, 2 of the victims identified her as actively participating in some of the sexual abuse. She wasn't just a procurer. She also was involved in many of these cases. And so, look, that's according to the victims. It was presented at trial. And so, again, she was convicted based upon some of that testimony by a jury of her peers. I choose to believe them, and I think that's been vindicated, in our justice system. And what I really find sickening about the entire handling of this is it has allowed not the conspiracy, but has eroded the amount of trust in the entire system at a time when you were literally elected to kind of not only fix that, but specifically on this case to immunize yourself from any sort of special dealings. And so I'm very worried about the way that they're handling this right now. And there's still a lot of open questions of like how we can trust anything both that the government is saying. I mean, Ghislaine, let's look at her legal argument. Her legal argument is, guys, you can't prosecute me because you already promised that you wouldn't. She doesn't even deny the crimes against her. It's just that you promised you would never prosecute me, and you need to keep your word, right? And it's sickening. It
And
really
that
is
and
sickening.
that did not stand up in court because
Yes.
they violated the Victims' Rights Act or whatever it's called.
Bingo. They violated the rights of the victim. And, the victims are unfortunately lost in a lot of this. And I mean, it ruined all of their lives. It ruined it. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, this is it. There's that element. There's the intelligence element.
Final question on Epstein, and then we'll move on. Do you think he killed himself?
No, absolutely not. No
You
question.
don't.
I don't have I don't have a question in my mind that he
Really
did not. No.
see. I believe it
Yeah.
makes sense he would kill himself because there was nowhere for him to go.
No.
Like it was the jig was up. He was done. He was definitely. He tried to kill himself before that, and now he did it.
So same thing. Let's keep ourselves outside of the world of speculation. Let's look at the evidence. Michael Baden, the most famous forensic pathologist in the world, said that he analyzed the autopsy based upon the records provided to him by his brother, Mark Epstein, Jeffrey Epstein's brother, Mark Epstein. Michael Baden concluded that, it's not consistent with a hanging. The explanation from the Department of Justice just makes absolutely no sense. They've never released the autopsy. They have always asked us is that we have to trust you based upon your analysis of it. I mean, look, I would point people, this isn't just a plug, but we recently had an Epstein an inmate at the MCC on our channel who was actually in the security housing unit where Epstein was housed. And he's like, guys, I was an inmate in this facility. There's no way. There's multiple other cameras. By the way, also, I mean, if your only experience with the judicial system is that you previously were able to beat the shit out of it through a non-prosecution agreement, your connection to intelligence, why would you kill yourself? You have billions of dollars at your disposal. You have the best legal defense that money could buy. I mean, the jig is not up in any way. It's not like this vast conspiracy or whatever had yet to be revealed. I've covered this case since day one, just so people know. All of this intelligence stuff, it took me a year or so to get there. I wasn't there originally. In 2019, I'm just focused on a non-prosecution agreement. I covered Alex Acosta's press conference. 2000. I literally went back to look. My first video on Epstein is from 2018, just so people understand.
Wow.
Yeah. So I've tracked this from literally.
So the novel, the Jean Carré novel here. You need to write this for me. So as far as you're concerned, I want to know that. So you are suggesting that someone very powerful, could be Mossad, could be CIA, someone, I would imagine a foreign government, comes in, finds a way to kill an American citizen, even when they're in a maximum security. You didn't. Well,
no,
they bribed someone or told someone to do something. They turned the cameras off. They said, go to sleep. Something happened. That's a lot.
Brian, there's 3 minutes of missing footage from the cameras. There's 3 minutes of missing footage. None of the other inmates have ever been revealed. The DOJ and the BOP refuses to release the names of the inmates who were housed in the shoe around the same time. The camera angles don't make...
the DOJ is involved in this?
Yeah, see, this is what I mean. Their original explanation is my friend and old boss, Tucker, asked the BOP while Trump was in charge and said, give me the names of the inmates. They're like, oh, well, we can't violate their privacy. It's like, oh, really? Yeah.
Well, that's legit, though. That is legit.
But to Tucker's point, these are people who don't have any federal civil rights and are housed in the BOP. They literally can't vote and they can't own a gun for the rest of their lives. Okay, fine. But, fine. At the same time, again, I point to the forensic evidence is the most convincing to me. The Baden, everybody go take a look at it. The hyoid bone, the way that it is not consistent with the hanging. He said it, not me. So I'm going off of that first and foremost. Then I'm going at the 3 minutes of missing footage released by the government. The fact that the original OIG report, Office of Inspector General report from the DOJ says that the guards were sleeping and that multiple of the cameras were broken. But then it's the only camera, angles that were released have missing minutes of footage. There are multiple other camera angles which could have shown entry and egress routes for somebody inside of the facility to be able to participate in. I think another inmate killed him. If that sounds so far-fetched, it shouldn't. There are hundreds of murders in the U.S. federal penitentiary system per year. These guys kill themselves kill each other over a guy not paying a 50-cent coffee debt. I'm not joking. This is actually reality.
I know that, but you're gonna have to. My Occam's razor is he killed himself.
I don't see
now.
it.
Cash Patel says that. So does Dave.
Why should I believe him? Yeah,
I'm just saying. Pat Bondi. Look, I'm saying now. The burden of proof is on you. Where you've got to tell me who got to that inmate and what did that inmate get in return. That's a lot.
Listen, like I just said, these guys kill each other over nothing. I mean, the Aryan Brotherhood will stab somebody literally over like a missed gambling debt. Like the idea that they're not
Well, he
for
might have been.
sale.
By the way, it's possible he got killed. It's possible they kill chomos. They kill child
Yeah,
molesters.
that's it. But that's another great point. Is that
Yeah, they don't
sexual
last.
people? These people are like enemy number one inside of the federal system. And yeah, this was in a MCC. Look, it was an MCC lockup. The whole thing is just insane. The whole thing is. Look. You could be right, Brian, and you're right. That burden of proof is on me. I'm not claiming to be. I'm not claiming that I have the evidence to back it up. I wish I
Yeah,
did.
nobody floats the possibility that maybe a couple of inmates said there's a chomo in that thing and he can't live. And because
right.
they actually get you in jail. They don't get you a lot of times to stay. So because that's when because when you go to state pen, something like that, he goes to PC, he goes to protective custody.
Yeah,
or he goes to a special jail like in Arizona. But what people don't know is that when you get a guy like Epstein, who's that visible and he's a proven child molester rapist, I promise you that those guys will get you, and they don't want anybody to know about it because then they got to do more time. So there's a very good possibility that nobody talks about where they went, hey, I know when the cameras are off, or I know when they reset. I know when this guy falls asleep, whatever it might be, or the guards, by the way, also look the other way in these situations. Yeah.
Listen, you may be right, Brian. That's a very plausible explanation. I just know it's like the Warren Commission. The government's explanation doesn't make any damn sense. That's all I know. So I'm going off of that.
All right, time will tell. Time will tell. What else is on your mind? Because I'm looking at Gaza. I'm looking at Israel. As a guy who I lived in the Arab world, I grew up around Palestinians. I lived in Lebanon. I've been to Jordan. I love the Middle East. I love Arabs. I think what's going on in Gaza is awful. But I am also sympathetic to the Israeli cause. I support the existence of Israel as a nation state. I think that that anybody who picks up a history book knows that the reason Israel needed a nation state, the reason they stop at nothing to protect their existence, is because their existence has always been under threat. If you think October 7th is rare, it is not historically, and it is case in point of why Israel needs a nation state. However, it does seem that this response lacks all proportion. It does seem, when you turn northern Gaza into the surface of the moon, when you create a crisis like this, where children are, if they're not dying, they certainly are starving, or at least this is awful. This is awful in so many ways. It's not good for the Jewish diaspora. It's not good for Israel's image. It's not good for Israel in general, I would argue, in the long run. Your thoughts. I gave you just my synopsis there.
No, fine. I think that's all quite reasonable, what you said, Brian. I also, let me echo, I spent a lot of time in the Middle East. I lived in the Middle East. I like Israel. I studied in Israel. I have nothing against the country. The point that I always come back to, what I come back to, is a theory of realism and a theory of trying to operate through America's strategic interests. This sounds very cold to a lot of people, but let me lay out the case for why I actually think it leads to the most moral outcomes. And what I mean by that is that the way that Israel has conducted itself in what I believe to be morally dubious and outrageous ways, like you're referencing the starvation, like you're referencing also in the way that they've conducted the war in Gaza, is because of the ultimate backstop of the U.S. empire. And what I believe is that this is a consequence, unfortunately, of not really working with the country, or not really working for our own strategic interests, and allowing our country's interests and foreign policy to be guided at the whims of a different one. And I point to the Iran crisis as an excellent example of that, in which we were drawn into this conflict with Iran, bombed the facility, the nuclear facility, after a war that Israel started. This is after and while the United States is pursuing diplomatic negotiations with the country of Iran.
I would push back on a war that Israel started, because Hamas and Hezbollah are proxies.
I was talking about Iran, though.
Okay.
Well, okay.
I get why. I think Israel said, you know what? You come over, you do this, you build all these tunnels. There's no way we can fight this war. Hamas was booby trapping buildings. When it comes to war, I don't know how to fight this war. I know that there are a lot of warriors that would say the only way to do this is this. Now we can, that's all. I'm not going to get into that.
See, it's funny. I've actually spoken with a lot of warriors who would disagree with that. And in
Maybe,
fact,
yeah. I wouldn't. I would never engage in that debate. I don't know enough about combat guerrilla warfare or in inner city warfare. But I do think that Israel saw an opportunity to neutralize or neuter one of the largest destabilizing forces in the Middle East. I think that Israel is also looking at the fact that with the Abraham Accords, et cetera, they're going to be able to create an alliance with all of the Gulf states. The larger issues, I think the Gulf states are primarily Sunni. The Sunni Shia divide is very important in the Middle East, taking that into context. But overall, I think it does feel like Iran has been neutered. We're not going to stop them from exporting their oil because a lot of people need that oil, like China and India and places like that. But I would push back a little bit on the idea that Israel started that war, because it's less of a war and more of a strike. Yeah, they bombed them.
Okay. All right. Look, they were not exchanging direct fire, and Israel started the first strike. Can we say that? I think that's fair, right?
Yes.
I mean, look, the whole Iran Hamas thing, I would just say, like, even at the early days of October 7th, that's not exactly the way that they were talking over there. And that only became a very convenient talking point a little bit later. And it's a lot more complicated than, direct cash transfer.
To your point, Hamas is Sunni and Iran is Shia.
Exactly.
And in fact, both consider each other apostates at the end of the day. You're right.
There you go. So it's not as rosy with a bow as I think that the Israelis would like for a lot of us to believe. My point, and dissecting a lot of what you just said, is number one, you said Iran has been neutered. Not even the Israelis claim that, okay? Not even the Israelis claim that Iran does not currently in possession of at least somewhat of a nuclear weapons program. Your second claim is the belief that this was good in the end of trying to prevent an Iranian nuclear weapon. I think it's the opposite, and I'll lay out my case. In 1981, Israel struck the Iraqi nuclear facility under Saddam Hussein. The theory was we're going to go in, we're going to take out the nuclear facility. That's going to nuke Saddam, literally, we're going to kill Gaddafi's nuclear weapons program. He'll give it up, and then we'll never have to deal with Saddam's nuclear weapons program ever again. What ended up happening? The Israeli strike drove the program underground, emboldened Saddam's ambitions to try and get a nuclear weapon, actually get Saddam to strike trying to fake that he has a nuclear weapon, which leads to the United States invading Iraq in 2003 under the false pretense of WMD. I would also point to the Syrian reactor. 2007, the Israelis go in and they bomb the Syrian reactor. My point, though, around this and trying to connect this story is that it often seems that in the long run of observing their actions, it's never really about the nuclear weapons. And also, by the way, I still think that's the case because they took out the Syrian nuclear weapons program in 2007. And today, Al-Qaeda sits basically upon the throne of Syria with Israeli auspices. Now, they're having a fight right now about the independent Druze, and that's, by the way, very complicated. And the way that they're framing that is really just not accurate in terms of.
It's not.
Well, it's complicated, Brian. I mean, here's the truth, man. I went and I looked, and I'm not caping for Al-Qaeda here, but what we're talking about is the Druze population. So you lived in the Middle East, so you know, and I lived over there.
The Druze, for those of you guys don't know, were a sect of Islam that broke off about in the 11th century and are essentially their own thing. They actually don't follow the Quran. They follow sort of their own book, and they're maybe a little bit like Mormons or something, but they're
like
definitely their own thing.
There's like Sufis and Druze. It's hard.
Yeah, they've traditionally actually always aligned themselves with the Israelis. They make up a large part of the Israeli army when it comes to, and the Golan Heights has way more Druze in there.
So if you listen to the Israeli story, the story is that these horrible Syrians came in and started killing all these Druze. So I tracked the story from the very beginning. All right, so here's what happened. The Syrian Druze got into it with the Bedouins, who also live in that area. Somebody hijacked a truck or something like that. It leads to tit for tat retaliation. Some people are getting beheaded, including Bedouins like Druze who are beheading the actual Bedouins. It leads to widespread violence, in the Druze area. The Syrian government which has already accepted Israel's legitimacy over the Golan Heights, says, hey, this area, we need to exert some sovereignty over it. So they send, regime troops, the new Al-Qaeda regime troops, to this area, the Druze area. On their way there, those Syrian soldiers are kidnapped and killed, stripped naked by the Druze. By the way, while they're there as well, the majority of the Druze tribal leaders agree to a ceasefire with the Syrian government, except for one Druze tribal leader who is explicitly allied with the state of Israel, and he declares war effectively on the Al-Qaeda government.
I didn't know any of this. I didn't know any of this.
This is what I'm saying. So by the
way, I'm loving hearing this because I've been losing sleep over the fact that I thought that they were coming in to villages and just indiscriminately killing.
I mean, they kind of are now. But my point is, like, that's how it all started. All right.
Right.
So when I tell that story, you're like, okay, well, it's like there's no good heroes here, right? So then what happens is that the Al-Qaeda guys are now getting into it with this Israeli-backed Druze leader. And in retaliation, Israel bombs Damascus, including the presidential palace, right, on live television as a signal. Israel does not care about the massacre of civilians in Syria. That's preposterous. Assad massacred hundreds of thousands of civilians, okay, all right, for 14 years. They didn't do anything about it. The reason that they are doing this is because this Israeli Druze leader is part of a greater Israel project to push out a, quote, indefinite presence in the country of Syria. I am not making this up. This is from the Israeli government.
It's important to realize the IDF wears the Greater Israel patch.
Yes, the IDF and the Israeli government has declared a policy of, quote, indefinite presence in Gaza, Lebanon, and in Syria. And I'm not talking about the Golan. That was already part of Israel, according to them. I'm talking about this Druze-controlled area of Syria. So we're not talking here as well about human rights. It's the story I just told is a lot more realpolitik and about exerting effectively a buffer zone about the Greater Israel project.
The Druze are essentially a proxy of Israel.
Well, I don't want to smear. There's 2 million people, right? It's complicated, and they've been through hell. So I don't want to say that they're, whatever.
But you're just giving context for what we're actually
seeing.
The
one tribal leader who is aligned with Israel is very happy to have the IDF come in on his back because, as you also know, Brian, they've been trying to have their own separate Druze entity that is not ruled by Damascus or Israel for quite some time. There's 2 million of them. I sympathize with that. I understand. All I am saying, though, is that the claim, at one point of like preventing Druze genocide or whatever is a little bit ridiculous. Okay. Like this is a much more realpolitik. Now, this returns to my point about realism and why the protection of the US empire is destabilizing for the region. I do not believe that they would have the audacity to engage in behavior like that without the full force and backstop of the American military and the American empire. I don't believe, let's take the Iran situation. So I can tell you're a little bit more sympathetic. So I'll just lay out the case, all right? So in April of 2024, Israel bombed the Iranian embassy in Damascus, all right? Their claim for the bombing of the Israeli embassy in Damascus was what? Is that it was an IRGC base. It probably was. Let's all be honest.
And they had some high value targets there
that
were running.
Yeah, right. Yeah. The problem with that is that it violates the very norms through which all diplomatic embassies run cover. Do you not think that there are CIA assets inside of every single embassy in the world? By the way, by that standard, the CIA or the Russians would be well within their rights to bomb the US consulate in Poland, the US embassy in Poland, which is literally an outpost to run the war in Ukraine. Not joking. And also in the city of Lvov. All right. Both of those cities are basically transit points for NATO weaponry into the country. And by the standard.
Typically attacking a U.S. embassy would be an act of war because
it is an act of war. It's an act of war. We will fucking kill you if you do that. If you're a sovereign nation and you do that, it's over. So what happened? They bombed the Iranian embassy in Syria. Then Iran responds with ballistic missiles against Israel. The United States comes in and by some accounts shoots down over 90% of those ballistic missiles against the state of Israel. I would posit that the destabilization is because then of the backstop of the American empire. There is no world where Israel is bombing an Iranian embassy when they actually have to take it themselves. As everybody just saw in the 12-day war, they got fucked up by those Iranian missiles, even with the US and the David Sling and all of their systems that were working together. I mean, downtown Tel Aviv, Brian, you've been there, so have I. It's heartbreaking, man. It looks like London in the Blitz. It's crazy. We're talking about downtown. Imagine walking around.
I actually didn't know that Tel Aviv took that kind of damage.
Oh my God, insane damage, insane. I mean,
that.
okay, in context, as in like buildings falling down, like rubble and all of that stuff that literally looks like it's out the Blitz. But the reason you don't know that, just so you're aware, is because they shut down American journalists from distributing a lot of cameras and footage. And one of my own friends,
is that right? Because they didn't want to give Iran credit for the kind of damage.
One of my friends, Trey Yinks, is a journalist for Fox News. He's the Jerusalem correspondent, the Israel correspondent, and he was reprimanded on live television for reporting a hit on the Pentagon. And by the way, Israel puts its Pentagon where? In the middle of downtown, just so people are aware. Okay, wow. So I'm just saying, all right, I want people to know that the reality is a lot murkier than a lot of what you're hearing on cable. And it is a lot more complicated.
It always is. It always is. Where does Israel go from here? And what do you think happens to the Palestinians? It literally feels like the Israelis are going to create a demilitarized zone. Gaza will become a bigger refugee camp, even more cramped, and the misery continues.
Under the current where we are, that would be a better scenario because, look, I take people at their word. The national security minister of the state of Israel, Ben-Gvir, says we shouldn't even be sending food. We should only be sending in shells, and we must encourage emigration.
Jesus.
That's what they say, okay?
Jesus.
Netanyahu is here in Washington. Sorry, Israelis are here in Washington today. They're meeting with the Pentagon of the United States. They are pushing a plan of annexation. Their theory is that they will just annex approximately 90% of the Gaza Strip, is that they will encourage remigration, which is ethnic cleansing,
Think about that for a second. They're going to go to Jordan, where Jordan's already 70% Palestinian. They're going to go to Egypt, where the Sinai. You know what the Sinai looks like?
I do, actually.
It's where the Jews were expelled, where they were getting stung by, insects and thorns. There are insects, thorns, and poisonous snakes with no water.
Look, it is obvious, from all of this that their plan currently within their government.
It's a land grab. It's
not just a land grab. It's full-on expulsion of the Palestinian, people from Gaza. And
all 2.5 million of them.
Well, whoever's left. I mean, nobody knows what the real number is, right? I mean, it's probably more like 1.6 million if I had to guess, just based on some of the, that's tragic for me to even say that, but that shows people what the death toll is. Look, I mean, the behavior and the statements, the worst thing, in my opinion, that's ever happened in the state of Israel is Google Translate. Because when you can just sit and translate what they're saying, because those quotes I'm giving you, they say them in Hebrew. Bibi is smart. He's from America. He's born in Philly. He speaks fluent English. He knows what plays well in English and what doesn't. The rest of those guys, they, seem to believe they live in some bubble. Ben-Gvir and Smotrich and all these other members of his government. I mean, right now, the scandal in Israel is that Netanyahu let food in. I wish people thought I was joking. I wish I was joking. That's the scandal. Yeah, the scandal in Israel is that he let food in.
They have no problem starving. A lot of those people in power have no problem just starving all those children.
No, they don't.
You've got even Morning Joe and Wolf Blitzer, who worked for AIPAC. You have them coming out and saying, this is outrageous. This is bordering on genocide. When you use the word genocide and you accuse the Jews of it, for me, I found it offensive because I was a student of Nazi Germany, and it was a deliberate, sort of defamation of what the Jews went through, right? So I was always like, all right, guys, take it easy here. Let's not get crazy. But when you hear Israeli rights groups, when you hear a lot of Israelis using the word now and legal scholars using the word, and I'm talking about people that have been vehemently supportive of the Israeli state, now we got a problem. Now what we're dealing with is people like Netanyahu who don't care what the world thinks anyway. And this is a zero-sum game. And I think what it sounds like is they're gonna get rid of all the Palestinians and just wait it out until we all lose our memory.
Your more liberal audience may hate me for this. I really don't like these terms, genocide and international law, because I don't accept the legitimacy. And I'm talking about in all cases. Yep. So there's a big leftist debate right now over whether this is a genocide or not. And you just cited genocide scholars. It's like when people say the words Putin's illegal invasion of Ukraine. there's no such thing as an illegal invasion. Okay?
Yeah.
There's just
That's
an
right.
invasion.
And it doesn't matter, does it?
And it
really
doesn't matter. See, that's the key. Mass murder is mass murder no matter what.
Mass murder is mass
whether it's an Armenian genocide or the killing of Armenian people, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Whether
That's
it is the mass slaughter of Jews or it's a genocide of Jews, the result is the same. So I will classify
and there's a shelf life on laying all of this blame on Hamas. Yes, Hamas needs to give the hostages back. Yes, we need to talk about that. They still haven't. They could lay their weapons down. Yes, but
yeah, I mean, and my point just on that is that, look, at the end of the day, this is not how civilized nations conduct themselves, including in the way the United States fought in the war in Iraq. The United States fought in the war in Iraq. By the way, I have a lot of criticisms of that war, but there were a lot of Americans who fought and died to protect Iraqi and Afghan civilians. I know some, actually, who were wounded, brutally wounded, in missions to protect the people of Afghanistan or the people of Iraq. And there's not a lot of Israelis who are getting killed, trying to protect the people of Gaza. And in fact, there's mostly the opposite. There's a new look. I would encourage people to go and to listen to a new whistleblower. His name is Anthony Aguilar. He's a 25-year veteran of the U.S. Armed Forces. He's a Green Beret, and he served in the, quote, Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which distributes the aid. And he said that he witnessed on multiple occasions war crimes committed by the IDF.
I believe him.
And there's no way, Brian, for you or I to even validate whether those claims are true, because international journalists, including my friend Trey, who I mentioned, are not allowed inside of Gaza without the explicit permission of the IDF, and they even have to, in some cases, screen their footage. There was a recent case just 2 days ago of Sky News journalists who were not allowed to film from the air Gaza during those airdrops because, I mean, you could surmise what you want. I think it's probably because they don't want you to see the surface of the moon looks like.
That's right.
Right? And so this is the reality of where we are. And I try not to speak in all this moralistic language. I just want people to take away from this. What's happening here is being underwritten by you and me, by all of us on April 14th. It really is, because the
United States is complicit.
That's right. And so we get to decide this is not, Armenia, or this is not Azerbaijan, right? There was recently this case, by the way, where Israel sold them all the weapons to ethnically cleansed Christian Armenians. Just saying, if anybody's interested in that. But this is not a country where the U.S. has no role. This is a country where we're not just funding it, we have underwritten it at a diplomatic and at a strategic and a political level here in Washington, where our own government is now trying to criminalize dissent over our opinions on this foreign conflict. That's the part that gets me upset.
It's the first time in my lifetime, though, Saagar, that I have seen Americans being this openly critical of Israel, including people in power. I've never seen that before.
I agree with you.
And I think this is, I do think that this kind of behavior is going to, I think whatever profit Israel thinks, the Netanyahu regime thinks they're getting out of this, I think it's going to bite them in the ass.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it already has. If you look at, the young opinions, like if you look at the opinions of the young, right and left, if you look at the way the dam is breaking in the Democratic Party today, which, by the way, was much quieter when Biden was president. Just saying, there are not that many people as concerned. But now that Trump is president, they can go full on with their criticism. But I don't see a future where any sort of bipartisan consensus or, in particular, Brian, you and I can remember, those times of like liberal Zionism. I think that's done. And kind of what I mean by that is that in the old days, liberal Zionism would be like somebody coming on your show, somebody who's like a pro-Israel Democrat, and be like, Brian, the reason I love Israel is because they have gay prides parades in Tel Aviv, stuff like that, right? That shit is over. Like that, it's the startup nation, the beacon of hope in the Middle East. That's not happening when we see the treatment in God. By the way, I'm not even talking about the West Bank. What's happening in the West Bank is fucking crazy too. In terms
I've
of,
been there too. I've been there too.
I wish I could have gone. I wasn't able to go while I was over there. I would love to go. I still would love to go. I mean, I think that the way that a lot of these Christian communities and Muslim communities are being treated is insane. The firebombing and the shooting. Just today, I mean, you're in Hollywood, Brian. There's a Oscar-winning documentary, No Other Land. Like one of the people, the filmmakers and the people, who I think he was interviewed in the documentary, was just gunned down on camera by an Israeli settler. And
Wow.
and by the way, the guy who was killed, his family was arrested, not the guy who killed him on camera. Like the system of justice is just ridiculous. I mean, it's out of control. And look, I don't usually have opinions on, Bantustans that are abroad. But the reason I do is because even saying that gets me branded as anti-Semitic in my own country. And we're also using the diplomatic cover of the empire for that purpose, which I just fundamentally reject.
That to me is losing its sting as well. I can totally understand being. Look, I always say I defend the Jews all the time. I have a thing in my bit in my stand-up now where I'm like, if you don't like the Jews, that's cool, but be consistent. If you don't like the Jews, you're not allowed to use any of their inventions, like the pill, Jewish doctor, like the MRI machine, like lasers. Even though they use them to control the weather, they also use them to cut out your freaking tumors and make your smartphone and everything else. And by the way, if you like fake tits, a Jewish doctor perfected that for the first time. So your wife may be a Christian, but her tits are Jewish. So
That's good.
I've always been the guy who says that, I've always admired the shit out of the Jews. I've admired what they've been able to do, how innovative they've been. How half the white volunteers during the civil rights movement were Jews.
Yeah.
I mean, they've always been at the forefront of social change. They've always been at the forefront of artistic ingenuity, scientific ingenuity. And by the way, human rights. I mean, they were always the ones on the outside, the lawyers that would take the impossible cases. So the strength to me of the Jewish diaspora and the Jewish character and culture was, in fact, to say, hey, we're speaking up for the underdog, for the outcast, for the abused, for the misused. They were they were the beacon. You hired a Jewish lawyer to save you from the majority, from the overwhelming. And I think that this now, Israel and their behavior has really, really washed away a great deal of that strength, that legacy, and that brand. Now, when I try to defend, I get crazy pushback. It's nuts. So,
well, I mean, I think the disservice they've done themselves, Brian, is that so much of what I have said on this show is deeply controversial. And I really welcome you for allowing me to say it. And even if you disagree, it's fine. And we're just here talking and exchanging facts in good faith. But I do want people to know that even though you may be able to publicly criticize Israel, I live in Washington. And in Washington, that is not the case. Okay. Here, I have lost friends, professional opportunities, networks, etc., all because of the way that I talk about this issue. I don't care at the end of the day because, I get to be on shows with Brian and I get to do my own show and I have my own independent fund. But I, once upon a time, 5 years ago, was a part of the system which relied on a W-2 income. Could I say that I would be as courageous as I am today? I can't say that necessarily. When Noam Chomsky, I think, once said, like, when your entire paycheck depends on you needing to say or not say something, then we have a pretty good bet as to which way you're going to be able to.
But so again, one of the things I admire about Israel, about the Jews, about what they were able to create was the fact that, if Israel doesn't exist in a lot of Jewish people's minds, they don't exist. I sympathize with that. When Hamas did what they did on October 7th, I said, hey, man, that we pushed that button called stop everything. You did that. You killed a bunch of kids in their pajamas. If I'm Israeli, I'm coming for you and you're all dead. I get it. For me, I truly sympathize with, number one, why Israelis are willing to do what they have to do to this is an existential threat. At the end of the day, for a long time, there were more Jews in New York than there were in Israel. At the end of the day, they are surrounded by people that don't want them to be there. And I think that I've always said if I was Israeli, I would feel exactly the way an Israeli does, maybe even the way Netanyahu does, because he's a realist. And if I was Palestinian, I would probably feel the same way a Palestinian does. It's why in this fight, I haven't said anything. Because sometimes in conflicts like this, I have this joke again, which is like, you want me to say stuff about Israel and Palestine? You want me to take a position here? You want me to, because I'm going to make a dent in a conflict that's been going on since Moses had a parting of the ways with the Pharaoh? I don't know, man. Because sometimes in conflicts, they're not your fight. And I find myself shaking my head and saying a prayer. That's what's been going on with me with this whole thing. I've been very quiet about it because I'm sorry, but at the end of the day, I hate what's happening to the Palestinians. I do think they were hijacked by a thug regime called Hamas. But at the other, I do think that this reaction has been disproportionate. I think there is now a point where we say, this is not serving Israel. And Israelis are saying that. I don't think that makes me controversial. I'm saying I think there's got to be a better way. But then if you're Israeli, you go, give us back the hostages. Stop doing this.
I would really hope that that space is opened up, but I am yet still aware of the way that conduct here works. And I just want people to know it's not as easy still as it may seem to talk honestly.
By the way, and I'm going to credit the Israelis for this too. So watch this, in my opinion. If you look at the history of the Jews, and the way they founded Israel, to me, the Arabs of the Levant were like the Native Americans. They never had a chance. They were under Ottoman domination. They were under British domination. And then finally they were under a British proxy called, essentially probably Israel, who had suffered untold misery in World War II. They didn't want them that way. They didn't want them this way. They didn't want them this way. They didn't want them this way. And against all odds, they were able to create this incredible country called Israel. It's a miracle. It's a miracle. So to me, they also said, we are always going to be under threat. We better figure out a way to make ourselves necessary to a power like the United States and to Great Britain. And the way you do that is you better get in positions of power. And, any group that's able to do that, at the end of the day, they have been genius about the way they do things. And I admire it.
Up to a point.
And I'm also shocked, though. I'm also shocked that they have done what they've done to Gaza. I did not expect this kind of the extent of this damage. I can't look at it too closely, because if I look at it too closely, I got to start talking the way I'm talking, which is This seems totally out of proportion. It doesn't seem good for Israel. And if you disagree with me, then take it up with Israelis. A lot of them feel the same way.
You're right. That you're absolutely right, and I understand why it's difficult, and it's very emotional, for a lot of people. And look, I mean, I just choose. I always operate from a position of America, and I think it achieves the most moral outcomes if we act only in our strategic interests. And I also think that it will allow us then to throw off the chains of where, like you just said, there's been a lot of propagandistic efforts to restrict the discussion on certain elements. And instead, to stop us from asking questions for ourselves or to seek out alternative information. So I totally sympathize with how you're feeling, Bryan, and I think it's probably very common, for a lot of people on this issue.
Yeah, is the best case scenario? I'm optimistic because I feel like there's going to be a pocket of misery, a pocket of true misery called Gaza, and I'll lose sleep over it the way I do. But my solace is that the Middle East overall will be more stable, starting with Syria, starting with Iraq, because of the alliance that the Gulf states have with Israel. And that will keep Iran in check from destabilizing places like Afghanistan. Am I naive?
Yes, I think so. I mean, there is no evidence for that claim.
Teach me, sir.
The evidence for that would be if the Gulf states were currently clamoring all over themselves to have an Abraham Accords, reconciliation with this. That's just not happening, right? Mm-hmm. Like, instead, it's the opposite. Is actually Saudi Arabia came to the defense of Iran, at least publicly, whenever Israel bombed them. That's actually a real miracle.
I
in and
didn't
of
know
itself.
that, sir.
Yeah, they put out a statement opposing it and basically saying that we need peace. I'm just saying, look, maybe they secretly supported it. I don't know. I don't think so. But my point is just that the UAE, Saudi Arabia, the Gulf states are actually more polarized against Israel than ever before. That doesn't mean militarily they're going to do anything, a la the Yom Kippur War.
But the Arab street, you're saying, I'm sure the average.
Oh my God. Look, and this is another point people need to remember. Everybody kind of talks about the Saudis as a kingdom. Yeah, ish, right? And you and I know this, Brian. Gulf monarchies are not absolute monarchies exactly. They're constituencies. They have balances of power. They have millions of population. Everyone's on WhatsApp in the Middle East. They're watching the same videos that everybody else is today. If the Saudi government is ever seen publicly shaking hands with Netanyahu, it's not going to happen. It would not be good for MBS. Maybe that's silently, true. They can allow certain things and all of that.
And they do. Secretly, they do allow stuff behind the scenes. Yeah.
Right. Is Sheikh Zayed or MBZ, he's not, appearing in Tel Aviv anytime soon, and Netanyahu is not coming over. So I don't accept the stability argument. I also think that what you're laying out, as I said earlier, might be the best case scenario, unfortunately, because they're not saying that. They're saying conquest and migration, as in a full depopulation of Gaza, either through killing or through expulsion, and actual colonization. They're saying it. Again, just 2 days ago, the Israeli Knesset passed 71 to something overwhelmingly to officially annex the West Bank. It's non-binding, but it's symbolic, just to say, this is ours too. In Gaza, I don't think it's a secret. They say a, quote, indefinite presence. And, you talked about the hostages. And again, I don't want to come across like caping or any of this or whatever for Hamas, but I read the full, I encourage people, all of this is in English. You can go read it for yourself. The full Hamas proposal that was given to Israel that more recent talks struck down over. And the reason that they fell apart is because Hamas demands a withdrawal from the Gaza Strip and Israel says no. Is that they're, at the very least, as you said, going to see some sort of demilitarized demarcation line, inside of Gaza. Or really what they want is full and total political control over possibly a settler population that will be, basically be granted a lot of the land inside of the country. And given the way that the political coalitions are working in Israel, I don't see a scenario where that isn't the most likely, especially with the United States so backing of Israeli conduct in the war.
Now.
For now. Yeah, but what's going to change? Trump literally said, what did he say? He said, we're going to own Gaza. He's like, we're going to turn into beautiful waterfront property. That's what the guy said. All right. At a certain point, you got to take some of it for his word.
When I heard him say that, it was so depressing. And I know you got to get out of here, but
sure.
Your assessment of the Trump administration's first, what has it been, 100 days? I don't know.
It's been a lot more.
Yeah, it's been more than that.
A couple hundred. Yeah.
Yeah, a couple hundred. He's got 3 more years at least, and change. What are your thoughts? My worry is that my biggest worry, Saagar, is that when Biden pre-pardoned all those people, it set a precedent. And the precedent was, now that you're in power, you can grift and do anything you want because I'm going to pre-pardon you. So you can do a Hunter Biden Ukraine deal, but way more, because that's small change. That's $10 million. Let's get into the billions, baby. Let's get into it. Let me get some businesses going. And, now Washington becomes an economy of influence. And don't worry about it, because I'm going to get pardoned. I'm going to get pre-pardoned. And after the end of this 4 years, I'm going to have $1 billion. That whole Trump coin thing was unbelievable to me. I was so disappointed.
You are correct about that whole Trump coin thing. That's an entirely fair argument. I think politicians should be judged on what they said that they were going to do, and to various different constituencies. So, this may be controversial. I actually think on immigration, Trump is basically doing exactly what he said he was going to do.
Agreed.
He said, and this is kind of, I don't know if you saw, I had an interview with Andrew Schultz, and Andrew was mad at Trump about the deportations. And I was like, no offense, Andrew, but the sign said mass deportation, bro. I was like, what were you I was like, what was confusing about the sign?
Yeah,
You know,
I mean,
it's like,
American people voted him in
Yeah.
on that
right. So,
principle.
like,
Absolutely.
it was literally promised. It was in writing, Alien Enemies Act. Like, this is what I'm doing, and this is what's going to happen. So, okay. So, like, let's stick with that. On the tariff side, I mean, look, this again, MAGA gets very upset with me, but I actually am somebody who's obsessed with trade and has been for a while, in large part because of Trump. I think he brought my attention to the matter. However, I think that the way that the Liberation Day tariffs and all of that were rolled out was a disaster. It was devastating for a lot of business. A lot of the quote victories are completely fake. They're filled with promises that are non-binding. Look, my wife is an international trade expert, literally actually negotiated real trade deals. This shit takes months, if not years, because you need snapback provisions, you need enforcement. The stuff that he's penning with the EU and Japan it's fake. Sorry, it's fake because it's like we promised to buy $500 billion of something. It's not real. There's no enforcement. It's like 15 years ago when NATO was like, yeah, we'll increase to 2%. And they never did, right? There's no enforcement. So if there's none of that, then it's not real, all right? So there's that. I would say on trade, it's been an absolute all over the place. Maybe we'll end up somewhere else.
Used as a negotiation tactic,
Yes.
and then they concede to something without taking into fact.
Yeah, it's just headline grabbing stuff. I'm just being honest. I'm a huge trade hawk. Like, I'm a protectionist. I believe in tariffs. I'm one of the most pro-tariff people in Washington. So I think it's important for people to hear me say this, to say that the way this is being done is completely wrong. So there's that. I also think that if we were to look at, so that's the kind of the economy front, the foreign policy was another big reason. I had a lot of people on my show who voted for Trump, who were AOC Trump voters. I'll give you an example, who voted for Trump specifically because they wanted to end the wars in Gaza and in Ukraine. And in the early days of the Trump administration, he got a ceasefire through. I'll give him credit for it. But since then, this mass starvation and all of that, that's a result of the Trump policy. And a lot of it is underwriting of Bibi. We have the Iran situation. You disagree with me, that's fine, Brian, but I believe that was a catastrophic mistake. The way that they did that,
I don't know if I disagree with you. I don't know enough about it.
All right, sure. But
I haven't taken a strong enough position on it.
He bombed Iran. Definitely that wasn't up in the cards. And right now, as you and I are speaking, he promised to end the war in Ukraine on day one before he even got into office. It's been a couple 100 days. And actually, he's come back to the Biden policy. He's continuing to ship weapons to Ukraine. He is continuing to fund the war. And now he's threatening maximum sanctions on Russia. Oh, if only we had not tried that before. It's actually literally the Biden policy, just so everybody understands.
How interesting. Maybe Biden knew a couple things after 39 years.
Well, actually, or we can posit he knew nothing, and then anybody who tries to copy it also doesn't know what they're doing. So
right. That's good.
Right?
I'll take that too.
Yeah, I just I'm very upset about the way that the foreign policy has gone. I mean, I knew there was going to be a lot of pro-Israeli stuff. I didn't really think it was going to get to this point, and I definitely did not think that the betrayal on Ukraine would be as stark as it is. Not to mention the Iran situation, which many people can disagree with you if they want. I would point to the body of evidence that I did previously, that bombing these nuclear facilities very often leads to regime change in the long run. And then more specifically is that the goals of the operation itself, the Iranian regime still is there. I don't think they've ever had more of a strategic calculus to go for a nuke other than today after the US and Israel bombed them. They still have the capacity, if they want to. And
wasn't it? I mean, we could do it, so we did do it.
Yeah.
It seemed that we were in and out. It happened pretty quickly, pretty cleanly, with very, very minimal casualties, if any at all.
There was zero.
Yeah. So why wouldn't we do that when they're clearly making a nuclear bomb underground? Why not take their?
I don't accept that they were clearly making a nuclear bomb underground.
You don't?
No, I don't. No, they were enriching uranium. That's not the same thing as clearly making a nuclear bomb.
Well, when you enrich uranium, it's weapons grade uranium. Right?
Okay, but how do you get a bomb to Tel Aviv or to New York? You have to put it on top of a ballistic missile, and you have to marry those two things with a warhead. Not so simple. All right, the North Koreans, it took 20 years, just so people understand. It's not exactly a soldering process that you can do in a garage. It's a highly sophisticated weapons program. The U.S. intelligence community assessed 3 months before that there had been no status quo change in the Iranian nuclear weapons program. Nothing about that changed. The only intelligence that changed was on the Israeli side. I had multiple sources inside the U.S. intelligence community telling me that what the Trump administration was saying was bullshit. So I'm just laying it out there that a lot of the claims and the justification for the war, not true. Second, they said we obliterated their nuclear program. That's not true, according to the Israelis, according to the Iranians. And the sober U.S. assessments also say that stuff similarly. So, I take things at their word. The idea that we obliterated all of their enriched uranium and capacity and all of that is just totally false. So I think that we could have easily found a diplomatic solution, which we were on the road to, until apparently the president wanted to use those diplomatic negotiations as a ruse to bomb Iran. So that's another thing where when you want Russia, a nuclear armed power, to negotiate with you, why would they negotiate with you? They're like, the last time you negotiated over nukes, you bombed them. You literally bombed them in the middle of a negotiation. That's why true. Putin right now, Dmitry Medvedev just put out a tweet yesterday where he's like, yeah, we don't give a shit about your deadline. Trump said, give you 10 to 12 days. He's like, we don't care. Good luck. The former president of Russia, he's just basically a spokesperson for the Putin government. And he's like, subtweeting Lindsey Graham or whatever, which is apparently the state of world politics. But my point is just that Russia's not afraid of sanctions. They're the most sanctioned economy in the history of the world.
Because people still need their natural gas, and that's the way it's going to be.
Right. And the current Trump plan, by the way, is to sanction China and India for buying Russian oil. So we're going to damage our economic relationship with two of the world's leading powers over Ukraine. Okay. So do you all want to are we all raising our hand to pay $5 for gas so that, Russia stopped bombing Ukraine? I didn't sign up for that. I don't think anybody should sign up for that. Yeah.
This has been an education for Trump. I would suggest Trump probably came in somewhat naive, thinking his personality and his authoritarian nature would convince people like Putin.
Yeah, but he was president already. He was already president, so he knew what he was getting into.
Yeah, but COVID happened and things shut down. So this has been an education for him. I think it's interesting. I think what the Russians respect is kinetic force. They always have. And if you want them out of Ukraine, you're going to have to just keep feeding the Ukrainians more and more sophisticated weaponry, which, by the way, props us up our economy. And business as usual, right? Business as usual. Iran will continue to attack Iran in one way or another with kinetic force. Business as usual. What is the alternative? I mean, where do we go? If I made you emperor, what is the alternative, man? You'd probably get sucked right into the same damn vortex, wouldn't you?
I probably would. That's why I don't want to be emperor. Almost anybody who wants this job is deeply sick. So you'll sympathize with this.
That's what I always come back to. I'm always like, if I'm Israel, you come over my border, you kill 1,200 of us, you take a bunch of hostages, including children. Me, I'm just telling you, I'm getting you all. And then I see. I'm just saying, as an Israeli, I see that population, spitting and hitting that woman who had clearly been raped or something. Bro, I understand the bloodlust. I really do. I understand that sort of thing. Where as a man, you go, I'm going to make you pay like you've never. That's my personality, and unfortunately, that's a lot of men. I'm not an original person here with the way I feel. And so it goes, eye for an eye, the whole world goes blind. It's just, to me, I find myself again, shaking my head, saying a prayer and saying, I just don't know. I listen to different podcasts about politics, points of view, and it's a little bit like watching or listening to the weather. It makes me want to wear a saffron robe, shave my head, and just start meditating, but I have children to pay for, so I can't do that.
I totally sympathize, man. And I feel that way too, just if anybody wants to know.
You do?
It's not, sometimes, I mean, it's not always, it's not exactly fun talking about the slaughter and starvation of children or reading up on nuclear programs, life and death often at stake more recently. But, sometimes you're just good at something. And I feel like what I've always been good, I've always just been fascinated by the news. Always.
You're great. By the way, you're great.
Thank you.
I love listening to you.
I appreciate it.
I think you're incredibly succinct, and I love getting my information from you because I think you're very fair.
I appreciate that.
You're responsive to evidence. I also I jive with you, I think, politically.
Well, I appreciate that, man. And I'm fallible human. I made many mistakes. I get over my skis, emotional, etc. But at the end of the day, I just try to help people understand the world because I know, how complicated and how you're made to feel stupid for having inklings about things. Like this Epstein thing doesn't make any sense. And so for me, I just want to give people the language to be able to speak intelligently about it if they're ever challenged or on the
But you,
war.
you come from a
Yeah,
platform of conservatism.
yeah, that's
And
right.
can for young people, can you define to me what being a conservative is? I've always said, as a conservative, for me, it was always like treat government as a necessary evil. Don't be naive enough to think that government alone can be this great engine of equality, or at least the great equalizer. I think that's dangerous because it puts the collective above the individual. So for me, it goes back to the Constitution. It goes
Yeah,
back
you're
to
you're not
individual
wrong,
rights.
Brian, and it's a very loaded question what you just asked
I
because
know
I
it
actually
is.
don't think I'm very conservative. So you're right. I come from a quote conservative background. I'm not really conservative. I would consider myself right wing, and I think those are actually very different things. So for example, a European right wing party is not conservative, and so what I mean by that is, well, yes, I'm not for universal health care. At least in the way that the libs mean it, which is like single payer Medicare for all, controlled by the government. I'm not necessarily opposed to universal coverage of some kind or of lower costs. I'm right wing in that my politics are basically framed around a singular idea of putting the American national strategic interest first whenever it comes to foreign policy, and also about using our economy to make sure that the individual family unit, not the individual itself, is maximized. And so I think all government policy should kind of stem from a position of making so that people can have children and thrive in the United States of America. And everything should flow from that, as opposed to where I think our current economic system is everything flows from whether the S&P 500 is returning at 8% a year on average. I think that's the opposite of kind of
Yeah.
where things should be. You can come at that from a right and a left direction. The left wingers would say like billionaires should not exist. I would say we need a lot more government policy, tax credits, et cetera, to be shaped around the fact that we need billionaires to exist who create very productive things and not over financialization. And I would say the thing that makes me the most right wing are a lot of my views on immigration. And which may be ironic to some, yes, as the child of immigrants, but I have done, all these books behind me. I have done so much reading and study of our country. And I do believe that we are in an era both of uncontrolled migration from the Biden era, but that our social cohesion and our ability to exist as a polity that can understand each other, reach civic understanding, have social trust has been eroded. There are a lot of reasons for that. It's not just immigration, but controlling and reducing the amount of immigration to this country and changing the way that we do it is a vital step in that direction. There have been many instances in the past where we had similarly high levels of of immigration to the United States, specifically the early
Illegal.
1900s.
There's a distinction, right? Legal
Yes,
immigration, of course, all for it. Illegal immigration.
right. And well, so even in the past, we had massive legal migration during the 1800s up to the 1900s. We shut the border down effectively from 1920 to 1960. It's one of the most important things our country ever did. It
I didn't know.
because
I didn't know that.
Yes, well, the reason why, Brian, it was a racist law too. So let me be clear. A lot of it was very racist against Japanese and against others. But nonetheless, by dramatically dropping the number of immigrants to the United States at that time, it allowed a cooling off period of some 40 odd years where there was a lot more assimilation. The idea that I would go back in time and tell a white American in the year 1909 that an Italian was white, they would be aghast.
I listen. My mother's Sicilian. My mother was at Sicilian when she was playing roller skating
Right.
in this waspy woman's front yard. She said, "Bring her inside. I don't want people, the neighbors, to see
Right.
my." Yeah,
There you go.
yeah.
So 100 years ago, that was not uncommon. To say Irish and Italian people would both consider themselves white in America would be insane. They're insane to the white people at the time.
Yes,
That
yes.
cooled off and took a while in our society. That's not a justification. It's just to say that's a reality. So I would say that the most right wing thing about me is I think we should put our country first, and we should definitely stop having this unchecked amount of migration that's just coming into our country. I think we need to restructure our economy. We need to save the American dream again. There's a lot of different ways that we can all come about that, but that's why I would dispute calling me conservative. I'm not a traditional conservative. I am much more, I would put myself in the vein of the European right. I think I have a lot more in common with them than I do, like, let's say, with Ronald Reagan.
Isn't illegal immigration, as it's been allowed to be in this country for the past 40 years or so, doesn't most of that illegal immigration get absorbed into the agricultural, construction, and restaurant industry? Don't they find jobs? I mean, I've been told we need them because what happens is they end up paying taxes and they're doing the kinds of jobs that a lot of people don't want to do.
That's a very complicated question, and that presumes that there should ever be a job in America that an American shouldn't want to do, number one, which is mostly a wage question, and that's not an immigration question. So I would dispute the framing. So first, I would say that it's unfair to the illegal immigrant and to the American, because it depresses the wage to some place where only somebody who is sending 90% of their paycheck via Western Union back to Mexico or Central America is somebody who should ever have that job. We didn't sign up in this country for a vast number of slave laborers to work in the underground economy. I think that's sick. It's wrong for the people who are doing it. It's also wrong for the employer. It's only good for big business. It's also really bad for domestic labor because they have to compete against that. And listen, I'll be honest with you in the way that the Trump people won't. Price is going to go up. Low prices are a function of globalism and of our economy. I think that's bad. I said earlier, I'm a protectionist. I don't think America is materially richer, even though the S&P 500 has returned 500% or whatever over the last 30 years. In fact, one of my favorite statistics in the world, Brian, is that the Shanghai Stock Exchange is basically flat to 2009. Their stocks have not gone up since 2009. The quality of life in China over the last 15 years in that period is orders of magnitude than the United States.
I can't believe you're saying this. I literally saw this video. The guy goes, "You want to see what a town of 14 or a city of 14 million?" It was like, I don't know, an hour and a half away from Beijing. This is what it's like at night. I was looking around going, "Oh my God."
Yeah, it's fucking awesome.
Families. It was awesome.
Yeah, it's awesome.
God, dude.
They have the best cars in the world are in China. Okay. They're in China. They're not here. Oh, absolutely.
Really?
No question. Yeah. I recommend a guy named Forrest Auto Reviews on YouTube. He gets his hands on all the Chinese EVs. It's not even just an EV thing. They're just better cars. They're better made, better run. They have better features. They're high tech. They're awesome. It's literally not a question. Unless you're a Ford F-150 driver, if you drive a compact SUV or a sedan, you would rather drive a Chinese vehicle. So my point is, how did that happen? What happened? That it's safer and it's cleaner and it's easier to live in China than it is in the United States of America to 2009. What went wrong? I think financialization, massive illegal immigration. Wages have a story there. The government has a huge, story there in terms of the way that we have our manufacturing tax credit system and all of that set up here. And so that is the singular focus. And I actually beg everyone who's listening to take away, sit with that. Why did China's quality of life exponentially increase in the last 15 years? Are you better off because the S&P 500 returned X amount? Are you better off because your television went from $1,000 to $200? I would say you are much materially poorer than you were in 2009. If you look at housing, if you look at, fucking consumer electronics, the iPhone has not changed since 2010.
There's more to life than abundance and efficiency.
That's right.
There just is. That's the other thing that we forget. It just is. I mean, we have sold our soul for that flat screen TV and all those creature comforts. I would agree.
That's the America that we are today. And as crazy as it sounds, we have a lot that we could learn from China.
Saagar, I'm going to let you go on that one. That was amazing. I continue to be a fan. My admiration grows. I really appreciate you coming on this, on the mother of all podcasts, as you know.
I appreciate, Brian. For me, it's surreal that the guy who, when I was a kid, saw in Old School even cares who I am. So that is a surreal moment for me.
There it is, baby. You. Come on.
Yeah.
That's what happens when you're an actor. People are actually impressed with something that a monkey could do. Hey,
don't sell yourself short.
I know.
You in the Old School and in The Hangover are iconic roles. I'm sure people still come up to you for them. They're iconic.
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah.
Great. It's great. Mad TV, all that stuff. I kind of found myself in I don't know, the genesis of a lot of cool stuff.
Old School's on Netflix right now. They just advertised. Really? I was like, shit, should I watch it again?
It's such a great movie. It's such a great
fantastic movie.
I know it is. It's
so
great.
good.
I love it. Well, if you're ever in Austin, I'm at the Mothership every night. So
Great.
come check it out. I'm not
I'd
going
love
to be
to see
in
you.
DC stand-up, but I will be in, I'll be around. Go
Let
to
me
Bryan
know.
Callen. Yeah, I'll let you know, bud. Hey, man, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
And could be considered off limits.